I hope you remember that the actual sign that we need to use here is ampersand ampersand, so we need both conditions to be true. The y of the player should be bigger than 20 when we are looking at its remainder from dividing by 100, and also the axis of the player and the enemy should be such that they collide. The more important check that we need to do in such a placement of the player is whether at least the right part of the player is colliding at least with the left player of the enemy, so it needed to be bigger than enemy X. And this is the check that I planned to write. Let's see what is going on now. You can see that now I am not getting any collision messages without a reason. So when I'm on the bottom, you can see that I hit enemy 5.7. When I'm flying, I see different numbers that are also not integer, and I can turn those numbers back to an integer when I use math4. Let's see what is going to happen now. Is this enemy 0? Yay! Is this enemy 1? Yay! Is this enemy 2? Yay! And let's hit enemy 5. Yay! And this is a collision with enemy 4. So apparently, if we want to know which is the enemy that we hit, this is one more thing that we can understand. You can continue this game by making a score, the number of times that the enemy, the player has fit through the gaps between the enemies. You can prevent him from going over the playing field, and there are few bugs that you want to finish too. And now that we are ready with this game, we can start something completely different. Let's unzip code.zip in a new folder called Chessboard. I want you to write a code to make a chessboard visible, similar to this one. You can see that there are 8 columns and 8 rows. I just want you to show squares on the places that need a colored square, just like this. You will need not only one line of squares, but you will need an outer for loop for all of the lines with a number of squares on them. So what I want you to write for this small task is a nested loops. The task to draw chessboard can be easily done with, well, 32 context fill rects. Sounds scary? Yeah, please don't do it. We could use 4 context fill rects to draw one of the lines, and this is also going to be ugly. I can ruin your code if I change the task in order to have another number of squares on a line. So apparently the best way to do it is to have actual for that is really going to loop different values of x. And now we should decide what should x mean, because I showed you different chessboards, and x apparently here will be 0 0, x and y will be 0 0, but what about x now? Is x 1 just as this is the first square after the square 0, and should x here be here 2 3 4, or instead x should be, for example, 50 100 150 200, and should it mean pixels or should it mean lines and rows? Well, I will give you a nice idea. Why don't we check what are the values of x and y, and because of their values to decide what should be the color of the square, or should we draw it at all or not, just like the white squares we can not draw them instead. So my advice is, please use x as a counter starting from 0 and increasing up while it's smaller than 8 with step 1. This for loop will make a step for 0, which is smaller than 8. Then it will make a step, and because x will now be 1, it will again make a step. Then it will x will be 2, and again let's make a step. X will be 3, again let's make a step. X will be 4, again let's make a step. X will be 5, again let's make a step. X will be 6, again let's make a step. X will be 7, and this is the last time that this condition will be true. Then x will become 8, and because x is not smaller than 8, the code in the curly brackets will never execute again. But if we make a step for each of those x values, we should be careful only to draw some of those squares. So perhaps you should think how to avoid some of the squares, or instead we can make steps by 2 in order to make a step only for 0 to 4 and 8, 0 to 4 and 6. If we have such a 4, then for the next line we will need another 4 that will be executed for different squares. So on some of the steps we will need a for loop that is executed for x1, 3, 5 and 7, and on some of the other steps we will need a for loop executed for x0 to 4 and 6. Whatever you decide to do, you will need another outer for loop with a counter y. Try to do this now.